Mr. Patterson, Dr. Hildebrand,
Here.
Mr. Gray, Ms. Lawson, Ms. Glasser.
Present. I do expect Ms. Lawson and Mr. Graves to join at some point, and so we will keep an eye on that and note for the record when they do appear. Okay, great. I believe Mr. Graves is joining now, so we'll note that he joined at 7:01.
Okay.
Okay. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There is no moment of silence this month. Note that next week we will accept the minutes for the July 21st legislative meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or questions about the minutes at this time? Okay.
I just received a message to Ms. Lawson joined.
Okay, we'll note that Ms. Lawson joined at 7:02. Thank you. The board met in executive session immediately preceding this meeting to discuss legal, personnel, and school safety matters as permitted by law. Mr. Harris, do you have announcements?
Yes, I do. Over the last 3 days, the administration has been held up at the Carnegie Museum over in Oakland. I'd like to thank all those folks at the Carnegie Museum for making us feel welcome during our principals retreat. It was a great event. Teresa Hawthorne set it up for us. We had guest speaker from Seton Hill University come in. A lot of other folks came in and presented. The directors did a great job. Principals did a great job. And I'd like to thank you for Carnegie Museum for hosting us. On August 14th, Community Day will be held at Dixon Preparatory STEAM Academy. It's our annual back to school event to celebrate the students, the families, the communities. So please come out to Community Day, August 14th, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And just so we all realize this, there's 12 days left until we start school. So families, please go out and get your uniforms, your haircuts, your new shoes, your school supplies, whatever you need. We have 12 days and counting. So we're coming back to school. That's all I have.
Okay. Any other announcements from board members?
You don't have your,
Okay. Need just one moment. Mr. Muir, we may need some assistance with login. In the meantime, we can continue. We don't have any votes quite yet, so we'll move on unless anybody has additional announcements. Okay, hearing none. Don't have student speakers this month. They are still on summer break, but we'll look forward to that in September. And we can move on to presentations. Mr. Wilson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Glasser, if you'll indulge me for a moment while I get set up.
Absolutely.
Share. That's not helpful for the people on Zoom.
I'm not the host.
Are you in now? I think I just let you in. Okay.
What am I doing?
Okay, you're good.
Fantastic. Got the fancy TV on wheels also.
The remotes are in there. The TV. They should be in your.
That TV? Feel like we can go ahead and get started.
Yes, I think so.
So strong. And there's a recording progress. Good evening, everyone. We have three major topics to discuss tonight, so I'm going to try not to take up too much of your time, but they are all critical things to discuss. TV access and everything now. The first topic that we need to discuss is the reopening health and safety plan. So we first started this conversation at curriculum committee last Tuesday, and we're going to take this evening to read through the plan again as we did last Tuesday and discuss with the board for the public that are watching right now, as well as for the board and anyone who's interested. The plan is up on the website, and we are seeking feedback right now. My contact information, Mr. Harrison's contact information, the board members' contact information are all on the website. We are actively seeking that on the health and safety reopening plan. We hope to have the board vote on the reopening plan next Wednesday. It does need to be approved by the end of September, but we do want to make sure that we've heard everyone's feedback before we submit. The biggest option or the biggest item on the health and safety reopening plan is masking. So we will have universal masking for all staff, students, and anyone in our buildings at all times unless eating. While eating, we'll have students and staff maintain a safe distance as per CDC guidelines. In terms of modifying facilities, we're going to continue to find ways to maximize our space. Oh, look at that. Microphone and everything. I have not often found a need for these, but I am happy to use this one. In terms of modifying facilities and space, we're going to make sure that we are maximizing the space allowed so that we can ensure 3 feet of physical distancing between students and staff at all times. We're removing excess furniture in rooms where necessary and appropriate so that we can ensure that spacing per those CDC guidelines that I already mentioned. Mr. Finney and his team have worked hard to install hand sanitizing dispensers at regular intervals along hallways of all of our buildings, and educators and scholars will be allowed additional time to confirm that proper hand washing techniques are followed. And then scholars, especially at the elementary level, will be taught and retaught those hand washing techniques at the beginning of the school year, along with all of our other proper routines and procedures. In terms of cleaning and maintaining healthy facilities, again, Mr. Finney and his team have ensured that each high-touch surface is thoroughly cleaned daily, and then common spaces like cafeterias and others that are used by multiple groups of children will be sanitized after each use of scholars. In terms of contact tracing, strict protocols will be followed regarding students and staff reporting positive symptoms or cases of COVID, and all affected will be notified where appropriate based on CDC guidelines, and again, based on those CDC guidelines, asked to quarantine. In terms of diagnostics and screening, currently we are not planning on screening scholars when they come into buildings. We are asking parents and families to perform cursory screenings of children prior to the school day and keep any scholars that are feeling ill home.
And we are asking that any student or staff member feeling ill to remain at home. And then we want to make sure that we are letting all the public know that we have already run 2 vaccination clinics in our buildings, one at Opportunity Camp, one at this building. We are running another one at Community Day this Saturday. Is that accurate, Ms. Golden? And we, as soon as we have access to the vaccine for scholars younger than the age of 12, as everyone knows, the vaccine currently is only available for scholars 12 and up. As soon as it is approved for scholars younger than the age of 12, we will run vaccine clinics in our buildings to make sure that everyone has access to the vaccine within the district. And then in terms of accommodations, the special ed team, Ms. Zackel and her team, have been meeting regularly with building staff, principals, and teachers to promote sensitivity to any accommodations or need for individual scholars. So IEP meetings and revisions to IEPs have been made to account for COVID mitigation, prevention. The ESY program, which was very successful, included some additional scholars based on COVID mitigation. And then IEP teams are meeting for any scholars that may have fabric sensitivities regarding masks to ensure that if we need to have scholars with shields, face shields, or any of the other accommodations, that those are being met. And then in terms of coordination with state and local health officials, we are in regular contact with Dr. Conti, who I believe is on the Zoom call tonight, as well as Mr. Morris, who's the Director of Emergency Medical Services in the county, and then several other health professionals. But we are predominantly looking for the Department of Health and Safety, as well as the CDC and Pennsylvania Department of Ed, to guide us on our health and safety plans and make sure that we are following the appropriate protocols. Again, this health and safety plan is on the website. We are actively seeking feedback, and we're going to move on to the map data next. But I want to just reiterate the keys to our health and safety reopening plan are that everyone wears masks. Everybody that's in our buildings wear masks. We will maintain 3 feet of physical distancing. And then we also just ask very openly and very honestly for flexibility and patience, in that the guidelines are changing again, as they did back in March and April of 2020. They are changing regularly, in some cases on a daily basis, but definitely week to week, the guidelines and what schools are doing and what they're asked to do are changing. But we are prioritizing 100% in-person instruction, also per CDC guidelines, 5 days per week. And that masking, though, is ever critical. We know that the Delta variant is 3 to 4 times more contagious than the original Alpha COVID-19 SARS-2 virus that we saw in March of 2020. But we also know that masking, much like in March of 2020, masking is the primary way to prevent the spread of that disease. So we're going to continue to mask. We're going to continue to ensure that all scholars and all staff, regardless of vaccination status, continue to remain masked so that we can prevent the spread of COVID. Any questions, comments, or thoughts from the board before I move on to map data and critical race theory? I know that this is a lot.
Yeah, I think there are going to be some questions. I want to make clear, though, to the members of the public that this is not a time for public questions. This is the time for the board to ask questions. There's an opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. This is not, unfortunately, a conversational meeting. But are there questions from the board on the health and safety reopening plan?
I got it.
Go for it.
So I had asked it on Tuesday about cafeteria and also the schedule to try to facilitate 3 feet of distance in the cafeteria.
Right. Excellent question. So we had principals retreat, as Mr. Harris mentioned, this week. We're working with principals. As of right now, much like on Tuesday, the answer hasn't changed. We believe that we'll be able to meet the 3 feet of physical distancing in all of our lunch sessions without having to change the schedule. We are continuing to monitor that. If we think that that's going to change, then we will certainly make sure that everyone's aware. But as of right now, we think that we can follow the CDC guidelines without having to alter schedules.
We're doing that also by allowing students to eat outside of the cafeteria too. So if there's alternative places around the building that they would like to eat, they can. So that's how we're getting around not altering the schedule.
And some grade levels I know are going to do grab and goes where they take their lunch to the classroom so that we can ensure that we don't have, overrun cafeterias.
All right. So as far as busing goes, I know obviously we have to wear masks, but assuming we can't space out students on the buses 3 feet apart, so I'm assuming that's going to be one of those places where that 3 feet distance is not necessarily maintained.
So
Yeah,
Go ahead,
the
Mr.
3 feet on the buses can't occur,
Okay.
but the windows can be down, and per the guidelines, that's one place where masks are 100% required. So we'll be giving masks to the bus companies to have. They'll have a stockpile of masks available. Like Eddie said, per the retreat, we talked, if the drivers come to the building and they're running low, the building can give them resupply them for masks, but the masks are required, and there'll be administrators and staff members to meet the bus every morning and help them depart, making sure the students maintain masks.
And then I have more curriculum-based questions that might.
I love
So-
curriculum-based questions.
I'm
Yes,
assuming
sir.
specials are going to go on as normal. So
Specials are going to go on as normal. Yes, sir. They'll also be masked where possible. So, band and chorus, orchestra can't necessarily be masked, but those educators are going to ensure that, again, per CDC guidelines, that anytime a student is playing an instrument or singing, that there is at least 6 feet of distance in those cases, and everywhere else will continue to maintain mask wearing. Yes,
all
sir.
right, and sorry, so my last question. So I'm assuming since the teachers all experienced with Google Classroom from last year, are they going to be sort of required to put all their material in Google Classroom so if students are quarantining, they can not miss any instructional time?
Yep, excellent question. So initially, educators are highly encouraged to put all lessons and all instruction on Google Classroom, but unless or until there is a student in quarantine in their class, they are not required to. As soon as we do have any student in any class that is required to stay at home because of quarantine, then those educators will be required to move all of their instructional materials, all the assignments onto the Google Classroom. We will not be going back to a hybrid model like we had for some of last year, but the materials, the assignments, the instructional resources will be required to be on Google Classroom for any scholars that are quarantined. Yes, sir.
Right. Well, since you brought it up about the hybrid thing, is there a threshold at which we would go back to? We're just going to wait for PD to give us instruction.
So we
If infection
are
gets above a certain level or anything like that.
Yeah, we are looking for more guidance from PDE. PDE and the national CDC have both stated that their top priority is in-person instruction, not hybrid and not virtual. My belief as the director of curriculum is that if we were to move to a space, if we were to get above 10% positivity rate, if we were to get above 100 per 100,000 cases per day, those key indicators as stated by both the CDC and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, if we were to reach those levels and Allegheny County were to recommend a shift in instructional model, then we would probably talk about moving to 100% virtual instead of trying to go back to the hybrid model. We know that the hybrid model was solid for ensuring that scholars got to see each other. It was not great for instructional framework, and the instructional expectations for this year have not been lowered or modified at all by the state. So we want to make sure that we're meeting those instructional expectations. We right now don't anticipate going to hybrid under any circumstances. It would be possible that we might move to virtual if we were to see a massive spike. We are hoping that that does not happen. And I will mention for the board The state is allowing for another emergency instructional template, which you approved graciously last year in October, so that if we did have to go to a virtual instruction model, that we could still count that virtual instruction as part of our 180 days and 900 or 990 hours as required by PDE. We'll be submitting another one of those emergency instructional templates in September for your approval so that we can apply to the state just in case we were to need to move to something other than 5 days per week, 100% in-person instruction.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
There is a question from another board member, Mr. Graves. I don't know.
Hi, Mr. Wilson. I have a two-part question. If I'm a parent and I'm not comfortable with my child starting school, what are my options? And I'm sorry, are you able to hear me?
Go ahead.
If you're a parent and you're not comfortable with your child starting school and you just want to wait and see, what are my options at that point? And when would my child be able to return to school if I decide it seems like everything's okay? At what date would they be able to return?
Yep. Great question, Mr. Graves. So at this point, we have the option for in-person instruction or our online academy. Our online academy is an extremely effective online academy that is available, and at each 9-week increment, families can opt to shift out either back to in-person or move from in-person to WOA if they're uncomfortable. So at each 9 weeks, that's when any decisions for a change in instructional model could be made by families.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Well, so I had a follow-up to that question, right? Because the online academy uses Edgenuity, correct?
Edgenuity for grades 6 through 12, and I'm going to forget the name, Accelerate Learn for K to 5.
So how coordinated are those curricula with what our teachers are teaching in the building? Because I know that was a problem when we moved the virtual last year, that they were not synchronized necessarily.
Right. So both are aligned. So the Edgenuity and Accelerate Learning are, as well as our curricula, are all aligned to the state standards and the state scope and sequence, but they are not. They are not perfectly aligned. It's not that, in Dr. Hildebrand's class, we're studying the Pythagorean theorem today. And so that also ensures that in Mr. Wilson's class, we're studying the Pythagorean theorem. There's not a direct correlation in terms of scope and sequence, but they are following the same standards, and we are able to intervene with scholars that either miss anything and come back to in person or vice versa. Am I missing anything, Ms. Golden, on that?
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Seligson, I saw you had your hand up.
Similar question. You mentioned the issue we have with Google Classroom, just keeping that pace. So what is the plan for when we have our scholars who are at home and we're not prepared with keeping up the lessons on the Google platform? So we're not playing catch up. What will be the process to ensure that we're sort of organized and keeping that pace?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be working with educators to ensure that as much as humanly possible, all of the instructional resources, assignments, materials from the classroom are on Google Classroom. The only change from what we did last year is that there won't be then actual live video or interaction between the educators. But pre-work, many of our curricula have videos that come along with the lessons, like Super Kids has its own videos that come with each lesson that are meant to mirror what the educator is doing. So we are making as much as possible that information available on Google Classroom. And then the rules around quarantining have also been reduced to either 7 or 10 days, depending on which guidelines from Allegheny County or CDC you go with, and testing. So we're hoping to, as much as possible, minimize time out of school for scholars, even when they have to quarantine.
Thank you.
So I had questions regarding, I guess, safety overall, and this is something we sort of touched on during committees last week. I'm a parent to an elementary school age child who is not yet old enough to receive the vaccine. And in speaking with other parents of my ilk, we have a lot of concerns about spread of this Delta variant. And I think we're naive if we believe that we're not gonna have outbreaks in our schools. So I think we as the board and we as the administrators, you as the administrators, have a duty to try to protect our scholars as much as humanly possible so that they can have access to this quality education. It is absolutely important for our kids to be in school in person. We need to create the safest possible environment for them to be able to do that. I had brought up about having on-site COVID testing administered by our nurses as a potential option. I actually brought a device that we own with me today. My husband's employer sent us this device so that he could test before coming into the office in person. I know we talked about it during committees. Last week, Dr. Hildebrand had some concerns about the accuracy of what they call rapid testing. So I wanted to just disambiguate for one point there. And I have a friend who is a pharmacist who took the time to put together a really nice write-up about all of these, what we'll call on-site COVID tests available. And the Q, which is the one that I have here today, is actually a molecular test. So this is similar to PCR. This is not under the category of rapid testing. It has a 2.6% false negative and a 0.9% false positive rate, which is the highest quality, most accurate test you can get outside of a physical lab. These cost about $250 a piece. And then they're extremely easy to administer. It's a nasal swab. I can take it out of the box if those of you would like to see it. It's basically a lab that sits on your counter. So you have the results. You do have the results within a half an hour. So in that way it is rapid, but it is not an antigen test. It looks like this. There's a charging cord that goes into it with each test kit. And I did bring one of those, but I don't want to have to open it and get all unsterile with it. But there's a swab in it, and then there's a cartridge which goes into this box. You swab the person who is, I would imagine, symptomatic. I don't think we need to be using this preemptively. Is this something that we consider bringing into our schools? Particularly, I mean, the data is showing with the Delta variant, unvaccinated populations, which includes all children under 12, and that younger populations in general are seeing this being really damaging, more so than the first round of COVID, which was tending to affect the elder populations a little bit more seriously. This seems like a no-brainer to me and a way for us to use some of the funding from the federal government to provide the safest possible option for our scholars.
Yeah.
I want to have a conversation about that broadly, and I want to have it publicly because I want folks at home and parents especially to know this is something we are talking about, and we do take their children's health very seriously, as well as the health of our staff.
Yeah, as a parent of a 3rd and 6th grader in the district as well, who's sending them back in person, I share those same concerns. I can't speak to the testing. Mr. Harris can speak to the testing, but I agree that we need to do everything in our power to keep our scholars safe.
Yes, I discussed it with Dr. Conti, who approached me with I think it's probably the exact same test.
This is the Q.
Q, yeah,
Yes.
CUE.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few weeks ago. And we are speaking with Ms. Golden back there, who manages the nurses, working with them. Dr. Conti would work with our nurses internally to develop some sort of process where we could have that, probably the same one to Q,
Yeah.
on site at our schools. So when students or staff showed symptoms or felt ill, the nursing staff could swab them and check within a short amount of time to do this. So, yes.
So have we ordered those? Because I don't see any of those on tabs, and
No,
our
we
school
haven't.
starts in 12 days.
No, we haven't ordered them yet, but we were looking at, there was a few different types, but I believe the Q is the one that we were looking at purchasing.
And I shared this document that my pharmacist friend, whose husband is a physician as well, and he did offer some expertise as well when she was putting this together, but it's really thorough, and not because I happen to have this, I just happen to have this. But in comparison to other options that are available for on-site testing outside of a medical facility, this is by far the most accurate, and $250 a pop does not seem unwieldy to me when we have government federal funds that are earmarked for COVID mitigation to have one of these in each of our buildings. I'm happy to pass this around if other board members would like to see it. It just looks like a little charging port, really. But pretty impressive piece of technology. And I think we need to do everything that we can to make sure we are mitigating this spread so that we don't see widespread illness and hospitalizations among our students and our faculty.
Is that something that, what's the timeline for?
I don't know the timeline. I have to
Okay.
check the availability. Like I said, Dr. Conti's on the call today. He approached me about a week or so ago and mentioned the on-site testing, and some of that technology wasn't even there last year.
Oh, yeah.
So
I mean, this is brand new,
it's
yeah.
Like Eddie said, it's
Right.
always evolving.
Right.
So we're looking to see that, but I know this, the CUE model, the Q, was what we looked at, and our nurses can do it with Dr. Conti partnering with them, showing them and supporting them. And it's something that we should have when we start school.
If that's an expenditure that we can approve next week, we should do
Right.
that. Otherwise, I'd be in favor of putting that on for ratification when they are available.
That's
in
what I was gonna ask. Within
September.
the next couple of days, we will find a source and then check our delivery.
Okay.
That was gonna be my question, and I guess sort of a follow-up to that. What is the, I guess we're gonna move to this queue, but last year we were checking temperature as we came in, so is that going to be the
Not as
process as well?
accurate- Not as accurate as this.
Okay,
Really. Like I said, I think that, well, I know the knowledge of the virus, people are becoming more educated. I mean, I would go to the barber shop, they would check me. They say, "Oh, you seem hot." I said, "It's 102 degrees outside." And he's like, "Yeah, I guess it is." So I think our knowledge is just getting better, and the devices, the technology, the vaccines. So like I said, well, hopefully the vaccines become available, more readily for the younger age groups. But this technology here to check on site is something that didn't exist last year. So we'll find a source, and it's going to have to be ratified because we're going to have to order it right away. Just like the masks and the cleaning supplies and everything else that we need to make sure that we don't run out of. This is something that we can't run out of. So
If we get a quote for next week, we can approve it. I mean, if we get a
We'll
quote
have
in the next few, even a ballpark, we can approve it not to exceed next week to do that. So, okay, other questions? Ms. Scott, do you have anything else? Okay, Mr. Patterson, any questions from you? Okay, anything else from Mr. Graves, Ms. Lawson?
I don't see any chance.
Okay, very good. All right, I think everything that I was going to ask has been answered already. So thank you, Mr. Wilson, for that. I would encourage members of the public who are listening, if you have additional questions, to contact Mr. Wilson, Mr. Harris, any of the board members, and we'll get those questions answered. In addition, I would encourage administration to schedule a question and answer session for parents in advance of the opening of school. If we can find a way and time to do that, I think that would be a valuable opportunity as well. So I think that, and also if individual school buildings have the chance to do that, I know it'll be a lot of time, but if there's a way to set up, visits and those kinds of things, I would encourage that as well. We should be as open as we can be.
Agreed, 100%. As a shameless plug, I know that at least one of the businesses in our area, I think several of them are selling Wolverines masks. Highly recommend getting a Wolverines mask. If you buy a Wolverines mask, then most likely it also gets a little bit of funding back to the district, which is great. All right, so I was also asked to speak more in depth to our NWDA map data. Specifically, I wanted an opportunity to break that data down by race for the board so that we could look at some of the disparities that are there. And so I've created a presentation. I will try not to go too long. Those of you that know me know that I can talk about data for hours and hours and hours. And so I will try not to do that this evening, but I do want to highlight some of the disparities that do exist in the district. And I want to talk about what we're going to do to try to eliminate those disparities. And I want to point out what a priority that is for the district. So these first few slides are the slides that I shared at curriculum committee, but for anybody that wasn't able to join for curriculum committee, we know last year we did not give the MAP assessment in the fall. We did give it virtually in the winter, and then we gave it in person in the spring. And so these are the district growth reports from the MAP assessment last year. So this is winter to spring. You can see that KN1 saw negative growth. We believe that that's because in the winter time, when we gave the assessment completely virtually, there were parents that were sitting next to scholars saying, "I know you know this, you know that 2 + 2 = 4. And so then when we had educators giving the assessment in person, we feel like we had a lot more accurate picture of the data. You'll see that specifically in grades 6, 7, and 9 in mathematics, we actually exceeded the national norms, the national expectations in terms of growth from where we started in the winter to the spring. So that is certainly to be lauded. And in a year of COVID, I think any growth at all is to be lauded. And you see that we saw growth in grades 3 through 10, which is a good thing. Obviously, we want to see our observed growth above the grade level norms projected growth at all times. In a year of COVID, I think that we need to give ourselves a little bit of flexibility and grace, but we also need to make sure that we celebrate those grade levels and those scholars and those educators that continued to push to instruct and make sure that we had high quality instruction across the board last year, even in a year of COVID. In reading, the growth is not nearly as great, and we know that that's in large part because we saw really great scores in our reading from the virtual assessment in the winter. We also know that reading is the harder of the two subjects to see quick growth in. Research has pointed that out multiple times, time and time again. You'll see kindergarten and first grade, again, we saw drastic declines in growth, and then across the board, we stayed almost stagnant in all of our reading, and we hope to focus on reading. As you know, we purchased 10 books for every scholar in grades pre-K to 5 last year as part of an effort to increase our love of reading as well as just our reading fluency across the district. And in language usage, we're actually really excited about the fact that in the winter, we saw that language usage scores were really low. And the assumption was that that's because when you're instructing virtually, you can't look over a scholar's shoulder and help them with sentence structure and capitalization and punctuation and things like that. So that when we came back in hybrid, we were able to demonstrate some of those things. And we saw really good growth, especially in grades 3 through 9, in terms of language usage, exceeding the growth expectations in the 7th through 10th grade. So we're really excited about some of those things, and there's some positive shining stars and silver linings even in a year of COVID in terms of our map. But a lot of the data is also somber, right? So we know from the projections that the map gives us that if we took the PSSA tomorrow, in mathematics, we could expect approximately 18.4% of our scholars to be proficient or advanced. That's this bottom right pie chart. And then in reading, the scores are a little bit better. If we took the PSSA tomorrow, we could expect approximately 39.8% of our scholars to be proficient or advanced. Both of those are well below the state average, so we know that we have a long way to go. One positive from this data is that it is directly in line with our historical data from the last 5 years. So we feel like it's accurate, and that gives us the glimmer of hope that this assessment that we give 3 times a year gives us accurate data so that we can use this data in real time to make changes in the classroom and affect more change as we go into 100% in-person instruction. I promised you at the curriculum committee meeting that when we went into this data and we dug deep in terms of racial disparities in the district, that it gets more somber, and that is 100% accurate. So these are the average percentiles for our scholars across the board in terms of the MAP assessment in math. You'll notice that in kindergarten and first grade, you have we're at the 99th percentile for both white and Black scholars. In the winter assessment when we went virtual, but that changes to 95 and 25 percentile when we do the spring and we're in person. The biggest areas that I want to point out are for both the winter average and the spring average, our white scholars are in the 4th quintile, so that's between the 60th and 80th percentile, and our African American scholars are in either the 1st or 2nd quintile, so either between 0 and 20th percentile or 20th and 40th percentile, for an average gap of around 50 percentile points, which is huge. It's really, really big, and it's really scary. In terms of reading, the story is very similar. So in both winter and spring, the average white scholar is in the 4th quintile, between the 60th and the 80th percentile, and the average African-American scholar is either in the first quintile between 0 and 20th percentile, or between in the 20th and the 40th percentile, for an average gap of a little over 50 percentile points. The disparities that are caused by the system that we have, and the disparities that are caused within the educational system as a whole and our practices are glaring. And we know that they're glaring, but it looks and it feels a lot more real when you see it in black and white there. We know that the language disparities look very similar. You can see those. It's still approximately 50 percentile gap. We know that when we look at the projections, the infographic here is the same data, but it looks even more telling. So in terms of math, if our scholars took the PSSA today, we could expect approximately 9.5% of our African-American scholars to be proficient or advanced, in comparison to about 41.7% of our white scholars. The 41.7 is just above the state average in math. Our white scholars are on par with the rest of the state, and we have a long way to go in terms of the way that we are educating to equity, to racial equity. Similarly, in reading in our ELA, if we took the PSSA tomorrow, we could expect approximately 28.7% of our African-American scholars to be proficient or advanced, in comparison to 67.9% of our white scholars proficient or advanced. That's well above the state average in reading for our white scholars, but not for our African-American scholars. We have a long way to go in terms of the racial disparities that we see in the district, and in terms of the racial inequities that we have witnessed to and that we have evidence of. And so we're going to focus on that. We're going to make it a priority in the district to focus on the racial disparities that are there and the racial inequities that are there. A couple of the things that we've done already and the steps that we've taken already, these were also highlighted at curriculum committee, but we have purchased hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of intervention programs across the board for this upcoming year for all scholars, but they are to individualize learning, to catch scholars up to grade level on learning. We've added time into the schedule for interventions at all levels, including charges of success at the elementary grades, an additional 45 minutes every other day in math at the middle grades, and additional library studies time at the high school. We implemented Opportunity Camp to wide success, and we hope to expand that drastically next summer. We're proposing an expanded after-school program at all schools for this upcoming year. We talked about that briefly at curriculum committee. I hope to have more details for that for you on that in September. We are currently training all of our school leaders on using and implementing a multi-tiered system of supports with fidelity. And we feel like that is going to go a long way in terms of individualized learning for scholars. We've partnered with National Math and Science Initiative to increase enrollment of students of color, specifically in AP and honors courses at the high school level. And we've partnered with the Office of Child Development from Pitt to train educators on the 3 R's: reading, racial equity, and relationships. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback on that. And then what I think from my perspective and my role is a critical step is that we're looking closely at our systems, our policies, and our processes to identify areas of systemic racial inequity. An example of that is at Dixon, we eliminated the traditional remedial Math 7 and Math 8 courses to introduce Intro to Algebra for all scholars in grades 7 and 8, because we knew that Math 7 and Math 8 were averaging class sizes of 24 and 25, and 85% African-American scholars, as opposed to Algebra 1 and Geometry that were averaging 14 and 16 class sizes and were 90% white. Those are systemic changes that we can make and that we have the ability to make. 40 years ago, a federal judge decided that the white kids in this area had a ton of resources and a ton of great educational opportunities, and the black kids in this area did not have those, and that we should form Woodland Hills School District to integrate. And that law was great, but in a lot of ways, that law didn't change what was happening to families and scholars in the district. And it's up to us to look at those with a fine tooth comb and with a microscope to make sure that we are actually making changes and eliminating racial disparities in the district. Which brings me to my last point, which is critical race theory. So we've gotten a lot of questions from parents, from taxpayers, from stakeholders around critical race theory. What is it? Are we teaching critical race theory? All of those things. So just to highlight for everyone, critical race theory is an academic movement from legal scholars from law schools beginning in the 70s. Its intent is to seek to critically examine the law as it intersects with issues of race and to challenge mainstream liberal approaches to racial justice. As such, critical race theory is not a curriculum. I can't call Houghton Mifflin and say, I want your critical race theory curriculum, please. So we don't, quote unquote, teach critical race theory. It's not a curriculum. We also don't teach the 1619 project, which is a little bit closer to a Bonn's curriculum, but is still also not a curriculum. What we do is we teach history from the direct perspective of both traditionally oppressed and traditional oppressors. And we do teach that history has lasting effects on society today. We teach that Christopher Columbus came to America. And some of us wouldn't be here without Christopher Columbus coming to America. We also teach, though, that there were indigenous peoples living in America long before Christopher Columbus ever set foot on this land, and then that he did some pretty bad things to those people. We teach that slavery was a foundational aspect of our country and the building of it, and that slavery has lasting impacts on systems and policies and practices, the same way that redlining and segregation and Jim Crow laws do. What we do not ever do, and this is a main concern that people that call me have, is we do not ever teach any scholar that they should be ashamed of their race or any part of who they are. We actively celebrate the diversity of our district, and we are a proud and varied Wolverine family, and we celebrate that diversity in all ways. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions from board members? Okay, I don't have a question, but I do want to say that, you know, we as a board have been sort of dipping our toe in the pool of equity policies and those kinds of things. You mentioned policy in your presentation. If there are policies that we should be looking at and we should be investigating, we want to do that. We want to be part of that effort and part of the work and doing the work that we can do on our level to set out the policies that are there. I think, you know, I'm certainly supportive of revisiting an equity policy broadly and seeing what work we can do there. And I hope my colleagues would support that as well. So let's continue that conversation as we go forward as well. But thank you. I mean, it's sobering data for sure.
Thank you.
Dr. Hildebrand.
Yeah, so I applaud all the efforts that you've initiated. So do you have an objective or a goal as to see what sort of benchmarks are you setting for yourself for improved growth scores, improved proficiency scores, and things like that to determine whether or not the interventions that we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on are working?
Absolutely. So great question. Oh, look, I see myself on the screen. That's a little disturbing. It's an excellent question and completely worthwhile. I think that in terms of long-term goals, and when I say long-term, I don't mean 20 years from now, I mean 3 years from now, we want to see a complete and total elimination of the racial achievement gap in the district. And we believe that we can achieve that. In terms of short-term benchmarks, we need to see that gap close. We'll put the presentation online, but you can see that the gap does close a little bit in very specific grade levels. And those grade levels are transition grade levels. In 6th grade and in 9th grade, we see a little bit of a closing gap because my hypothesis is all scholars are struggling at that time. And so we're able to focus on raising all scholars, and then the gap widens again. And so we know that there are some things that we're doing in the district that are working. And we think that a lot of the things that we started this past year are also going to work. And unfortunately, it was a COVID year, so we don't know how much of what we started is going to work. We don't know right now how much of the interventions are going to work, but we will continue to look at map data at every opportunity. We give it 3 times a year. We'll look at it as soon as the window closes. It's the first thing that I look at, and then I spend hours upon hours looking at it to see what's working and what's not working. The good news about the interventions that we've spent so much money on and that we have as resources are that they are very targeted to specific subjects and grade levels. So we'll be able to say, all right, the racial achievement gap is closing in this grade level and this subject. So using iReady at the 7th grade level in math seems to be working. But if it's not working in 5th grade reading, then perhaps the iReady in 5th grade math is not working. So we'll be able to analyze that much more closely.
Right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
A follow-up point to that was my similar thought was, since we're working on our strategic plan, that would be a really important, huge thing to add into that. So we have those measurables, so we're not just sounding wonderful that we're spending all this money. And, you know, that was some deep information, very disturbing, but we need to, it's been 40 years. We actually need to make progress.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I cannot agree more, because those numbers are disturbing, but unfortunately they're not new numbers.
Right.
If you pay attention to PSSA scores since I've been in the district, which is 15 years now or 14 years, those gaps have existed since we've been here. And we've thrown a lot of money at trying to reduce that gap, and it's unfortunately not been successful. So hopefully if we implement these with more fidelity and have more data-driven interventions, and that perhaps will be helpful. And I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely. And I don't want it to ever seem like this is just a local problem. This is a national issue. But because it's a national issue doesn't make it not our problem.
We're in the bottom 15%. That hits harder. Like, that is such a disturbing, intense awakening.
Right.
Like, it's not great. It feels pretty bad.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions, comments? Okay. I will second Ms. Ellickson's point about the strategic plan. I certainly hope that equity and closing the race gap that we see is a big part of that, because it has to be our focus. There's, a lot of kids' lives ride on it, so we gotta get that closed. Okay. If there's nothing else, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Appreciate all that information.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, Ms. Hawthorne, we have no registered speakers, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that moves us to board matters. Mr. Harris.
Okay, board matters 2.1, we seek to approve all August 18th, 2021 board agenda items by consent.
We will certainly entertain that motion next week if the board wishes to do that. There are several items on the agenda that we need to vote tonight, or that have been asked. It has been asked that we vote on tonight, so those would obviously be excluded from that consent motion. Any questions on that? Okay, 2.2.
Okay, board matters 2.2, we seek approval to amend the lease agreement with Heritage Community Initiatives to include the addition of room 11 at an additional monthly rent of $209.74 for the remainder of the lease period pending solicitor approval.
Questions on that? Okay.
Board matters 2.3, we seek approval of the revised Act 93 school and holiday calendars. This is because of the additional holiday approved by the federal government for Juneteenth.
Any questions on that? Okay, that moves us to curriculum. Mr. Wilson, welcome back.
Thank you, everyone. In curriculum, we only have 2 tabs this month. The first one, 3.1, we seek approval to renew our partnership with Nearpod Learning Platform in grades K to 12 for a total cost of $19,410 to come out of ESSER 2 funds. This is one of the platforms that we invested in when we first went virtual. Educators have seen a lot of value in Nearpod, and we believe that it can help us to continue our academic growth.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson on that one?
Yes, sir.
So the So we're only doing it for 1 year, because I noticed the bill has a 1 year and a 3 year option.
So they gave us a proposal for a 1 year and a 3 year option. We've chosen to ask for only the 1 year right now as we continue to evaluate the effectiveness of those programs. There are a few programs like NWEA MAP that we've chosen to go with a 3 year option. We've asked every vendor that is coming up for renewal to give us both a 1 year and a 3 year option, because we don't know necessarily how much Nearpod is a causal factor in any achievement and growth that we have. We want to maintain just the 1 year renewal right now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, ma'am. And then 3.2 is
Sorry.
simply that we seek approval of the district's health and safety reopening plan, which we reviewed. We reviewed at curriculum committee last week. I heard you loud and clear, Ms. Glasser. We're going to try to do at least one more parental feedback session before you vote next week. But that will need to be approved. The reason for the urgency is that in order to apply for ESSER 3 funds, those are the $14 million ARP funds that are allocated to the district, we do have to have that health and safety plan approved by the board prior to September.
Questions on that? Okay, just reiterate as well that there is a public review option. It's on the website. If anyone wishes to make comments on that, they can be in touch with any of us about that. Now I'll say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, special ed, Mr. Harris.
Okay, Pam Zackel is on.
Oh, she is.
Yes.
Ms. Zackel, good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not able to start my video. It's saying that the host has stopped it. It doesn't matter either way to me. You want to see my face or not?
You know, we're not seeing you in the room anyway.
Okay, all right. The Office of Special Education does have one tab this evening for the board's consideration. We seek approval for the contract agreement with the day school at the Children's Institute for the 21-22 school year. The total annual cost is $68,355 to be taken from General Fund 10. This contract is for a district student who had been receiving DART early intervention services and is transitioning to kindergarten. Upon review of his early intervention paperwork, his team determined that the day school is the most appropriate educational setting for him due to his level of academic, social and emotional, and medical needs. The student will be provided a 40-10 slot when one becomes available, and the average wait is about 1 year.
Any questions from Ms. Zackel? Okay, thank you, Ms. Zackel.
You're welcome.
People personnel, Ms. Golden.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We seek approval to accept the agreement between the Woodland Hills School District and Holy Family for student DF. This is a discipline placement that we're requesting for a student who will be going to 6th grade. Our current alternative program does not accept students since 6th grade. It's for 7 through 12 only.
Questions for Ms. Golden? How long is the placement? Oh, sorry, 45 days?
45 days.
Okay, great. Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Personnel, Ms. Boyd.
Good evening.
George,
Okay. Personnel, 6.1, Section A.
Need it on.
It's
you
not on
need
the
it
screen
laptop?
anymore.
Eddie, can you change your presentation to, please? Stop share.
Do we have
Here,
a tab
take
up
this.
anywhere?
Take this.
Try the Google. Microphone.
Personnel. 6.1, Section A, authorization for leaves. Section B, authorization for retirement resignations. Section C, authorization to hire professional staff. Section D, authorization to hire non-professional staff. Section E, authorization for transfers. Section F, authorization for EDR mentor actions. Section G, authorization for miscellaneous.
Questions here would likely require executive session, but are there any such questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Boyd. 6.2.
6.2, we seek approval to contract with substitute teacher staffing, STS, to provide substitute staff for the Woodland Hills School District through June 30th, 2022. I would like to note this date will be updated based on my conversations with STS and the transition timeline. So this will be updated for next week's voting meeting.
Questions on the change in substitute providers? When is our contract with Kelly Services expired?
It does not, it's a rollover contract that
Okay.
continues until either party decide otherwise.
Okay, so we can terminate that when STS is ready?
Correct, which is expected to be January 3rd, 2022.
Okay.
The day after we return from winter break. So we will still have Kelly Service contracted until that day.
Okay, and they are going to be able to provide us, Kelly's going to be able to provide us with subs until then. There's not going to be an issue with.
Correct. I received an update today regarding number of building subs that will be available in each building. As of today, all buildings have been filled except for Dixon and Edgewood. We're looking for 3 more substitutes.
Okay, it's good to put that out there as well. Okay, other questions? Okay, 6.3.
6.3, we seek approval of the PE educator contract of services for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022.
Questions on that? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Boyd.
Thank you.
Moves us to section 9, Ms. Niccolo, food service and transportation.
Good evening. Transportation has 2 board tabs, our annual approvals for bus drivers and bus stops. So 9.1, we seek approval of the 21-22 bus driver list. And this list will actually be updated for next week because there are more people coming on board. And there's a meeting tomorrow, a welcome back meeting at another depot, and have the opportunity to get some more drivers from that depot, but I will not know until tomorrow afternoon who those drivers are. So this list would be up.
Okay. Any questions regarding the bus driver list?
I just had a question. I know some of our neighboring districts are dealing with issues surrounding bus driver shortage, and it is still a nationwide issue. How are you feeling about the number of bus drivers we have and our ability to start school in 12 days?
Sure. I feel confident that we can open up our schools in 12 days. In many ways, we're not in any different stance than we have ever been at the beginning of the school year. We're generally always short to start with, but we do combine runs and have to do things in order to get all the kids out into our schools or to our other schools that we do transport for.
Yeah, I know we've had a lot of questions from parents who have kids in other schools that rely on our transportation, and that's been a little different over the past few years as well.
Right. We have gotten good response with the Act 372 transportation request form. So we've been able to streamline what we need for transportation for both charters and non-publics. And we did open up that list to our own parents just so that we could have a better idea of who needs transportation or wants transportation within the district. It is not necessary for our parents to answer that, but it just helps us to make plans.
That's helpful information because that's the first I've heard of it. And I think that's important that we have that on the public record too for folks who opt to drive their kids or walk to school as well.
Right.
Thank you.
And you do see that some of our neighboring districts are actually asking parents to provide transportation if they are able to, just to help alleviate some of these situations. But overall, I feel pretty confident, and people know that this month is usually a difficult month anyways, just getting everything put together. I will also put out there that we have had a number of our non-publics and charters being very remiss in supplying us with information in a timely manner. So we're just getting some of those rosters and enrollment forms yesterday, today. We're expecting some tomorrow. I did have a conversation with a parent this morning on a phone, encouraging her to ask her charter school to send us their information, because none of the contacts that we have made via email, phone, letter have given us the information for that charter school that is downtown. And it is for K-5 students, and we have no idea who is going to be at that school.
I certainly appreciate the hard work that you and your department put into this. I know it is a logistical behemoth, and I just want to make sure that you know how much we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And so second on that list then, if we're done, is 9.2 is just approving we seek approval of the 21-22 school bus stops. We have added a couple bus stops this year. This list may also be updated for next week.
Questions on the bus stops? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, that moves us to section 10, buildings and grounds. I'll note for the board, there are several items in this section that Mr. Finney is asking us to vote on this evening. So you ready for that?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
10.1, we are seeking approval to purchase the high school essay lab equipment from Allegheny Education System totaling $399,859.61 through the PEPPM or CoStars as listed from Capital Project Fund 39.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Scott, second by Ms. Seligson. Questions for Mr. Finney on this item? Okay, hearing none, take the vote.
Something's happening over here. I need to do a verbal.
Okay. This will be a voice vote. Mr. Graves, Ms. Lawson?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Graves, we didn't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Seligson? Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Lawson?
Yes.
Dr. Hildebrand?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
Ms. Glasser?
Yes, motion carries unanimously. That moves us to 10.2.
10.2, we seek approval to advertise the Woodland Hills High School essay lab shop equipment.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Scott, second by Ms. Seligson. This, questions or discussion on this? Okay, I'll note for the record, this is equipment that is not available through PEPM or CoStars.
Correct.
Right, so this is a different list. Okay,
This will be in addition to what we already just approved, right?
Correct.
right, but is there some of the same stuff?
No.
I apologize. I thought the total on this was, am I looking at the wrong tab? I think I'm on the wrong tab. I can't. Well,
There's an estimate of about 30,000 for
Okay.
the actual
I was looking at the wrong
wood
tab.
shop equipment. There's other equipment, though I have no idea what the cost is. I forget what it is.
Okay.
I think it's about between $40,000 and $50,000.
Okay, so it's, this is not gonna, an additional $300,000.
No, this isn't three.
Okay.
No, this
All
is,
right.
this is the remainder of what the list is. I think it's like 440 some $1,000, but not all of it is on Peppermint Co-Stars. We have to go out and bid because it's over the threshold.
Any other questions? Okay, I think the vote is up for those who wish to do that.
The vote was unanimous, Ms. Glasser.
Thank you, Ms. Hawthorne. Motion carries unanimously. That moves us to 10.3.
10.3, we seek approval to purchase classroom furniture from Paragon PA State Contract number 44001662 for the math wing of the high school in a total amount of $188,567.61 from Capital Project Fund 39.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Scott, second by Dr. Hildebrand. Questions on the furniture purchase? Okay. Hearing none, we'll take the vote. Motion carries unanimously. 10.4.
10.4, we seek approval to purchase classroom stools from Columbia Manufacturing, PA State Contract number 44001662 for the math wing of the high school in the total amount of $4,595 from Capital Project Fund 39.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Scott, second by Dr. Hildebrand. Questions on this purchase? Okay, hearing none, we'll take the vote. Motion carries unanimously. 10.5.
10.5, we seek permission to purchase classroom furniture for the math wing of the high school from All Seating Corporation, PA Contract number 44001662 in a total amount of $6,877 from Capital Project Fund 39.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Scott, second by Dr. Hildebrand. Questions on this item? Okay. Hearing none. We'll take the vote. Motion carries unanimously. 10.6.
Okay, before I get to 10.6, per discussion earlier, a few hours ago, I was given some more information from Canfield that needs to be board approved tonight to add to this board tab.
Okay,
So I'm seeking permission for Canfield for a change order request, a lower level storage room at the Woodland Hills High School. It's for the asbestos abatement and selective demolition for asbestos in the lower storage room. So the entire garage containment is $650. The abatement of pipe installation and fittings comes to $3,650 for a total of $4,300.
And this is asbestos abatement, I'm sorry.
Down the ESA wing in the basement.
Okay. Is there someone who's willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Scott, second by Dr. Hildebrand. Questions on this?
And it's unforeseen because the ceilings are closed in with the old plaster, and they're removing the plaster to make the new changes with the fire and new piping, and that's when they found this up in the ceiling.
Do you know when it was discovered, Mr. Finney?
I want to say probably about 8 days, 9 days, roughly.
Okay.
Less or more.
We need to encourage the contractors to get this stuff to us in a timely manner. I mean, this is, I don't want to hold the project.
Well, we have a whole basement that's going to be like this. So, and again, it's being done in phases.
Yeah.
So I'll try to get them to make sure they get it to us before the board's.
Right, I recognize it's a relatively small amount based on the project cost. It's still not nothing. You know, I understand the process and I don't want to hold up the work. But, you know, this is difficult.
Is it a new business or can we add this?
We can add it as new business later. It's gonna have to end up there eventually. So we want to table it for now and come bring it back up under new business.
I think we can wait.
Just add it into the
Yeah.
regular tab?
I'm thinking I just found out about this. I received the first email a day or two ago on this. I mean, you know, LG, because they just start demoing down there. I'm looking for the,
Is it gonna hold up the work if we don't approve it tonight?
you allow it to happen, just let it happen. And we can't slow down the project.
Right.
So, I mean, they'll just continue it and we'll ratify it. That's okay.
And that's the other way to do it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't want to have it on the new business, at least, you know, that, yeah, but it,
I mean, we can add it to the agenda as we can, well, it doesn't have to be new business at this point. We can add it to the agenda as 10.12 for next week. Yeah, I mean, we can add it to the agenda as 10.12 for next week and consider it then instead of tonight.
But I guess your point is though, I know this, you know, we're doing this in phases. Are we going to have any more surprises that are going to be a lot more than this? Is there a way to scope it where we can have an actual cost?
I'm going to bring that up in our next construction meeting.
Okay. This is what, how many thousands? 9,000?
$4,000.
4,000 for that piece? Okay.
So, but I mean, if I understand you correctly, this is in the ceiling. So there's some of this that is not known until the ceiling gets opened up.
yeah,
Right.
this is a plaster ceiling.
These are whole plaster ceilings.
That they just start demoing. It's in the basement, the rifle range and all that space down there. The email I actually received it on Monday. So that's when I found out about this change order. So, I mean, they're still working out some details. But yeah, they discovered it Monday, I'm pretty sure.
Would certainly be my preference to do this next week instead of tonight. I'd like to have time to review Mr. Patterson.
Didn't we have something in place to where they could continue to work but not exceed more than?
No, the board never authorized
process.
The board never authorized the dollar amount for us to continue.
We talked about it, but it was not authorized.
They wanted to see everything as it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so 12:51 Monday is when I received the email alerting me that, Mike, what do you want to do with this? And I said, well, I don't want any asbestos in the building.
Right.
Or we know
Oh,
we
no,
need to
certainly
remove,
not.
so.
Yeah.
And they start working on getting prices and stuff. So I think we're, they're down there, but they're still gonna have to set up everything and contain it and get everything set up. So,
But there's potential to be more because it's we're tearing down that whole entire steel.
they already did.
It's already gone?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So this is there's not gonna be another change order?
This should be it. I don't think there's any other.
We got a hallway down there that has ceilings that they're ripping on too.
Oh, they're not done yet?
That's all opening. Yeah, and that's another phase. Part of that old wrestling room, that's where they're at, and that's where they found those fittings. So once they're done with doing that, they're gonna move out that hallway. Those ceilings have to come out.
There's a
So
possibility.
There's a possibility of more.
Okay.
If the board wants to authorize us, up to 10,000, keep the project going. And we can, have these as ratifications in the project moving. As Mr.
I mean, that's the other way to do it, is that
Yeah.
we can authorize an amount and let these things keep going as long as they're small and ratify them at the next opportunity, so the project doesn't get held up. That's the other,
I'm fine with the 10,000,
okay? So will you make that motion, Ms. Ellison?
motion to cap at 10,000?
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to, let's go back. Can I get a motion first to table the motion that was made earlier? Okay.
Okay.
Anybody opposed to tabling that motion? All in favor? Okay. So the motion that Ms. Ellison is making is to authorize up to $10,000 for this change order. Ms. Scott seconded that motion. Any discussion on that motion?
That should be covering, that should cover
That-
hopefully the
yeah.
hallways that we haven't pour out yet.
Right, and
Yeah.
that'll be a standing
we're-
authorization to allow up to $10,000. That'll be a ratification.
If I'm not mistaken, that is the absolute last phase of demolition and any asbestos that can be found.
Okay.
So
And
that piece will be done.
Yeah, and I do understand it to be specific to abatement, right? At
Yes.
this point, okay.
But that's not just a one and done 10,000. That could be multiple times that they have.
It's
Specifically.
She's restricting it to abatement,
To,
not all contractors.
right.
Sure. We're
Just abatement.
at this is it. This is
Okay.
the demolition.
Right, but between now and then, there can't be 3 different times that come back abatement requests. Like,
So let's make this specific to this one is the concern that I'm hearing. right?
Okay.
So specific to this
Correct.
issue,
Yeah, the
up to
whole-
$10,000 authorized, we'll ratify the specific number next week, hopefully.
Okay.
Does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. So even if this is authorized for now, it's not to exceed, they can't go over $10,000 and we'll get the specific number and ratify that next week. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on that? Okay. Hearing none, we'll need a roll call vote, Ms. Hawthorne, to authorize that not to exceed.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Ellison,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Dr. Hilframe,
no,
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Ms. Glass.
Yes, motion carries by a vote of 6-1. Okay, so that'll be an additional item in the facilities. That'll be added to the agenda for record keeping purposes. Okay, 10.6.
10.6, we seek ratification of J.J. Morris and Sons to install the unit strut system in room 201 physical lab in the amount of $4,063 from Capital Project Fund 39.
Okay, any questions on that? Will be considered next week. Okay, 10.7.
10.7, we seek approval to enter into a new 5-year contract with Cone Elevator at a quarterly payment of $3,672 from General Fund 10.
Okay, any questions on that? So the total cost of this annually is 4 times $3,600.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, other questions? Okay, hearing none, 10.8.
10.8, we seek permission to dispose of old classroom furniture, including desk and chairs from the high school math wing classrooms, 222, 220, 218, 216, 214, 212, 210, 221, 223, 225, 227, 229.
Questions on that? Just encourage reuse to the extent that we can do that. If there's anybody who wants desks and chairs, we should get them to them if we can do that.
Can I ask a timeline question?
Sure.
So we just ordered a whole bunch of new furniture. We have to suppose that this is going to be ready to be done by 23rd. Back.
This map-laying won't be done up until, I believe it's September or beginning of October. That's when the furniture will be delivered as well.
Okay.
This is part of the phasing that's going to be happening.
Correct.
The classrooms that'll be handed over. Okay.
We've given them 10 classrooms, so that's what's been ordered for that.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions? Okay, 10.9.
10.9, we seek approval to use environmental marketing services to remove old chemical materials from the high school for the total amount of $5,695 from Capital Project Fund 39.
Questions on this? Okay, hearing none. 10.10.
10.10, we seek approval to have Triangle Roofing, Inc. remove the existing Dixon concession stand roof and replace it with new asphalt shingle roof and aluminum gutters at the total cost of $10,000 from General Fund 10.
Questions on this? Okay, hearing none. 10.11.
10.11, we seek approval to permit the use of Woodland Hills School District facilities for the stated events.
Any questions on this? Okay. And Mr. Finney, we're going to add the request from the borough of Swissvale to hold the meeting at Dixon next week.
Yes.
Everyone, I forwarded a note to the board about that. Hopefully there's no issues. They will need to advertise that meeting. So I will let them know that we expect to approve that next week. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Finney. School finance, Mr. Gigliotti.
Yeah, I'm gonna cover the library too. We will be adding another board tab to seek approval of the MOU regarding the grant funding for the Swissvale Library. So that'll be on the agenda for next week.
Okay.
I'll get it attached and yeah, it'll be under the library. Under school finance, we'll be seeking ratification of the bill list for payments that were made after the July 21 meeting. Are there any questions? Any of the bills? 14.2, we are seeking approval of the bills for the month of August. If there are any questions on those invoices. We're seeking approval of our fund reports and student activity reports for the month of July. Sorry. July. Are there any questions? I'll hurry before the lights go out.
Yeah, I was
We
gonna
seek
say,
approval of the investment reports. And 14.5 we covered in the finance committee. We're seeking a 3-year extension to the local auditors, Zelenkowski and Axelrod, for $19,370, the fiscal year ending June 30th, 22, and $19,760 for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023. We are seeking consent of the selling of PF Asset Management LLC to U.S. Bancorp Asset Management Incorporated, much like we did a couple months ago when First Student was bought out. Pennsylvania Liquid Government Investment Trust has the management group is selling to U.S. Bancorp. So they're asking for our consent. So we put it on the agenda for the board to vote to consent, and we'll sign it. If no action is taken, the consent will be automatic in 60 days. So we'll put it on for, we put it on for your consent. And 14.7 is seeking approval to pay the vendors for the Community Day activity, and the invoices that would be ratified at the September meeting.
Okay.
Questions on any of the items? Thank you.
Okay. Hearing none. Just in case, I'll note for the public listening on Zoom that we are having the lights blinking a little bit here at administration. So should we lose power, we will apologize for that. Mr. Harris, Superintendent.
Okay, Superintendent 15.1, we seek permission to adopt the Operation Recognition Program at the Woodland Hills High School. I'm sorry, Woodland Hills School District. Operation Recognition is the district appreciates and recognizes the sacrifices made by the young men and women of the U.S. Armed Forces. During times of war, many enlisted were serving their country while their classmates were marching in commencement ceremonies back home. So now those veterans are given a second chance to earn their diplomas through Operation Recognition. It's for those honorably discharged from the U.S. Armed Forces who served in the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and World War II. We would be issuing those diplomas during the high school commencement ceremony.
And this will create an application process
Yes.
for that. Okay.
Already
Questions on this? Okay. Hearing none. 15.2.
Okay, 15.2, we seek permission for the Woodland Hills Marching Band to attend a field trip to Florida, Disney, during the 21-22 school year.
Questions
This
on
was
the,
presented during committee.
it was, questions on the band trip? Okay. Hearing none, that moves us to old business. Any old business? Okay. Any additional new business? Okay. Committee reports, if we can do those quickly. We did meet in committees on the 3rd and 4th of the month. Mr. Harris updated us on his plan for strategic planning, which will be commencing tomorrow, as I understand. And also on the Operation Recognition and the band trip, as we discussed. Ms. Scott, curriculum.
Lots of the stuff we discussed in curriculum this month was also covered by Mr. Wilson in our lovely presentation at the beginning of today's meeting. But just to summarize that, the reopening health and safety plan, the SR3 application and feedback, the proposed 21-22 after school programming, the map data synopsis, which we all saw this evening as well. And then the two others with our critical race theory, which was discussed tonight as well. And then the Chromebook use and instructional framework for this school year.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Special education had no report. For technology, we updated on Chromebooks. And I will also note the Chromebook return and our efforts to ensure that we get the Chromebooks back and that they are updated for the start of the school year this year so that they can be redistributed to students as we begin the new year. In addition, Mr. Muter spoke with me before the meeting tonight and asked that I update the board to let them know that he is planning to apply for the emergency E-rate funding. The application is due this week. We would approve any funds that are received and the purchases thereafter, but just a notice that he is planning to apply for that grant. Typically, we don't approve grant applications that are going in, just the approval of funds when we receive them, if we are fortunate enough to do that. So that's the process we'll follow here as well. So that's the update from technology. People personnel, Ms. Seligson?
For people personnel, we discussed the New York Life Grief Service presentation by April Bailey and also the Holy Family AEDY placements. Forbes Road, we were on vacation this month, so no meeting for that.
Okay, and since Mr. Belmont is not here, I will just mention that athletics, the new athletic director, Ms. Frankie, is arrived in the district. I had the pleasure of meeting her on Saturday at the uniform distribution. And she seems very excited to get to work with the district. Human resources, we don't really have a chair. Mr. Harris, do you want to handle that one or shall I do that as well? Yeah, I can do it. We discussed for human resources, the addition of several positions, including a high school dean and 2 administrative positions, as well as the additional guidance counselor who will be in place. There'll be an additional counselor in the district to serve, to ensure that we are serving our middle school as well as the high school.
Right. And, well, to add, a couple of years ago, we had a reduction. So now after COVID, we found funding available. So we will be adding additional counselor at the high school as well as our middle school.
indeed. So, and that was the conversation in Human Resources. Facilities, we had our presentation from our friends at SiteLogic and Core regarding the high school project, as well as an update on the efforts to address temperature control issues at Wilkins. And we continue to pursue options related to solar as an energy option for the district, and we're evaluating proposals on that. Ms. Curry also being absent, will update on transportation and food services, both of which had general updates, mostly related to the preparation for the new school year, including the selection of drivers, an update on driver status and food service and the work there. And finally, for finance, since Mr. Graves is online, if I'll ask his indulgence to go ahead and give the finance update as well, which is only to say that we discussed the extension of the contract with the auditors to move us through the transition from Mr. Gigliotti's tenure into Ms. Shaver's interim tenure, and then to our new business manager. That department is asking that we approve an extension with Zelnowski and Axelrod to cover an additional 2 years of audits and ensure a smooth transition in our finance department. So that is the committee reports. Reminder that we have committees once again on August 31st and September 1st. Because of the way September falls, they are a little bit early by 1 day this month.
Ask a question.
The other report that I have is from the Sunrise School. We continue to deal with the roof. There is a meeting there next week, I believe, to continue to discuss those issues. And I will keep the board updated on developments with regard to the resolutions that have been put out for consideration by the districts. We continue to wait for results from the consideration at our neighboring districts, although we have considered all of those at this point. So if anyone has questions on that, feel free to ask those. Any other reports from members?
Mr. Glasser, I do have a question.
That moves us to public comment. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board at this time? Please feel free to come up to the mic. And you have 2 minutes. And we ask that you give your name and place of residence. Welcome and invite public comment. Feel free.
Will I be able to get any feedback?
Not at this meeting. We'll address any questions after the meeting. Sure.
It's Ira Glick. I live at 1427 Jefferson Heights Road in Eastmont. And one of the issues I wanted to ask was about the infrastructure, that it's known that the health professionals say that the masks have limited efficacy against airborne as opposed to the liquid droplets that it is effective against. There might be some controversy about it, but anyhow, I was wondering, the airlines have sophisticated ventilation systems. So there haven't really been any super spreaders from the airlines. It's amazing that their ventilation systems in this small area is keeping people healthy. And I was just wondering if the health professionals have advised to keep windows open, especially in public buildings. So is that part of the plan, to keep windows cracked a little bit, or are the ventilation systems so sophisticated here, like at the airlines, that you're not concerned about that? So just maybe should open the windows, keep people healthy. The other thing is, I was just wondering, I attended the curriculum meeting last week. I was late, but I was talking to Mr. Wilson, who graciously told me that a large group of the students, maybe 40%, did very well with the online learning. And they were focused. It's just, they're a certain type of personality, I guess. So I was wondering, have you noticed that the enrollments have declined because some parents and scholars are opting to go for that, the online schools and other possibilities? What are the numbers? Do you have more students, less students? And with all the problems with COVID, is that a issue? I'm just curious what the enrollments are. Right. And the last thing is, schools can't do everything. The heal societies, inequities and problems and things, progress that you want to make. do the schools, does the school district reach out to other third parties, whether they be retired people, people who would volunteer tutoring, or big brother, big sister, or other maybe church groups or something like that, or other people in the area that can maybe bring something to the students that the school is limited in what it can do. There are limits. And that's just, if you consider these comments, that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Glick. We'll be happy to discuss that at the conclusion of the meeting. Anyone else in the room that wishes to address the board? Okay, if you're on Zoom and you wish to address the board at this time, please use the raise hand function to indicate your interest in speaking. And we'll give you a few seconds to find that button. Okay, we're not seeing any hands on Zoom, so if there are additional questions or follow-up, anyone can feel free to reach out by email or other means as well. So, okay, that moves us to section 20.
Okay, section 20, adjournment. 20.1, we seek permission to adjourn the August 11th, 2021 agenda setting meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Seligson, second by Ms. Scott. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you all very much. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.
Good night.
My signature. I'm ready. Oh, okay. He was super busy and I didn't know like the rest of it. Okay. So I did reach out.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe he'll show, I don't know.
I know, thank you. Thanks for asking. Amy, you see those